Welcome, welcome back to Speak Pact. We are thrilled that you are here today, and it is going to be so worth your time because we're going to dive into the world of how to take a passion and or a trauma and truly create massive impact and make that a bigger part of your business and revenue model as well. Something that you're passionate about, maybe something that you invited into your life, maybe it's something that you didn't and it's something that you had to face. We have a beautiful woman who has done exactly that in her own life, and sadly she was faced with quite a tragedy that none of us ever want to face, the loss of a child. And she took that, and it wasn't even an accidental loss of a child. So that makes it all the worst, right? And she took that and she is s- now a globally recognized speaker who has helped others overcome the unimaginable. She's been featured on TED Talks, on CNN, on Variety magazine, and the New York Times. Um, she has been on different shows, and she is a prolific speaker. Um, she now speaks predominantly on mental health. And I'll have to ask you, Ann Moss, what the prestigious Billionaires Summer Camp is, because obviously I haven't been invited. So I'd like to know. I'd like to know a little bit about that. But
They asked me to come speak, and you stay there a week, and you're speaking to the CEO of Apple, the CEO of Microsoft, and Bill Gates is in the audience, and all these media people a lot more famous than me. So it was kind of weird to have all the famous people in the audience, and I was on stage.
yeah.
And we kind of had a panel interview, and this was on teen mental health and suicide specifically. And they asked me to read my son's lyrics on stage, which I'd never done before. And I was like, oh, no big deal. Yes, I'd love to. But when I hung up the phone and actually read them out loud to myself, I was a mess. I mean,
Yeah.
mascara all over the face. So, I'm Kleenex. I'm like, this will not do. So I had to practice it enough times, and I had to shorten it so that it was more digestible and that I could deliver it. Because as a speaker, you don't want to fall apart, right? You want to inspire and you don't want to traumatize. And that was my goal with that. And I thought, they won't ask me to do that part. There won't be enough time. And they did.
They did.
And
Oh my
Aaron
goodness.
Burnett asked me to read that, and I did. And when I looked up, there were 500 people completely silent, all crying. But it was not a sad moment. It was like a moment of connection
Yeah.
that I will never forget that feeling. It felt good. And that's odd to say since everyone was crying, but it felt good. It was kind of like we all purged some awfulness and got to a place of joy. And it was an amazing experience. And I spent all week there, and it was really lovely.
Well, I want an invite. That sounds incredible. But no, beyond that, I don't want to, I want to soften what you just shared. What a brave woman, number one, courageous woman, because most would just say, I just can't. Too much pain, like too painful. I just can't do that. But you figured a way to do it in a. So you and I spoke about this a little bit before we went live, and I'm not even sure how to word it because it's something that's very important as a speaker, and you just touched on it. You want to inspire through your story. You don't want
Right.
to be felt sorry for. Like that's the last thing you want as a speaker. So how do you get to the place where you can speak from your scars and touch a room and make the connection that you did without completely falling apart? How do you how do you get to the place where okay, I'm not going to be I'm not an open wound anymore. Sure, there's always going to be moments of, you know,
Sure.
something triggering, that seeing an old place where maybe you guys used to go or whatever, but um or hearing a song, right? That will trigger that in you. But when you get on stage, you are a professional, and those
Right.
scars need to be, I know it sounds a little cold, but they need to be tools to reach the audience and help them move the dial in their lives. It can no longer be about you and your pain. How do you do that? How do you shift that way?
Okay, so this is probably a three-part answer. So I'm going to start with post-traumatic growth. Everybody talks about you go through something awful and then you become this person you never thought you would become. And that is possible, but that is not possible unless you do the work. So you can't decide that you're not going to grieve at all and you're just going to smoke pot, because it numbs it, and you're going to do this and that. You have to feel those feelings. You have to go to those groups. You have to have a healthy toolbox of coping strategies to go through that pain. And I'd say the first 2 years, it's really raw. And my process early on, and I'd say most people should wait 2 years. I did start speaking a little earlier than that, but it was mostly to small groups, and it was specifically small groups focused on suicide prevention. And I've broadened that to more mental health topics. And I felt like I was kind of with my people. So I didn't want to get on stage and completely fall apart like a blubbering idiot. And my process at that time was I would have this big cry in the morning. I would get up, I would watch videos of my son singing, doing one of his rap songs or one of his old videos, and I would let loose. I mean, every tear I ever had in my body, blubbering, curling up on the floor, kicking the wall, whatever. And then later that day, I could deliver that story and I might get misty, but I wasn't like falling apart. And I think it's really important to end on that message of hope. So as you're telling your story, you've kind of got those, that formula of telling your story, but also ending on that message of hope. So I call it the 4 H's, and I wish I could think of those right off the bat, and I will in just a minute. But it's hope and healing and help, and you don't want to spend all your time on the hard part, where you were really struggling. So the hardship is the first part, and that should really only be 25% of your presentation. And the rest is how I got help, how I healed, and why I have hope. So those are
Ooh.
your 4 H's. Later on, I could tell the story, but I found afterwards, especially a few hours later, that I was emotionally depleted, especially during the months of May and September. May is mental health month, September is suicide prevention month. And those could be really critical months for getting the message out there. So I thought, what can I do to sort of help myself through this? So what I do is I pass out index cards, or usually there's a volunteer that helps me pass out an index card to all the audience members. And this isn't always possible with like audiences of 3,000 or more, or real big ones. But I asked them at the end to write one thing on that index card that they learned from my presentation. They can put a note on it, whatever, and then leave it at the middle of the table. And that's what they're going to leave me. That's their present to me, because they've listened to me for an hour or so. And I don't know their story. And I don't know what they've learned or what they've felt they could take away. Those messages have done for me more than I can ever, ever tell you. So what I do is I go get them, and I don't read them right away because I want to talk to my audience members, right? I want to listen to them. It's my turn to listen. I take those back, and later on, when I get on the plane and I start to get that kind of sinking feeling, that's the moment when I pull out those index cards and I read them. And then they fill me back up. And that's what reminds me why I do what I do. Because I'm an emotionally naked speaker. I'm going to tell you what I did wrong and what I wish I did. Also telling you that I have forgiven myself, but I'm also going to tell you some of the things that I did right. And some of the, I'm really proud of myself for having done this and admitting that I wasn't a perfect person. I wasn't a perfect parent. And, I just needed to learn from my mistakes. And my way of learning from it is to help other people learn from here's what I've found is the right way to do this. Because if I'm doing this, I have to leave them with some ways to move forward and figure out and resolve some of their own issues, right? I mean, otherwise it's junk.
Gosh, there's so much beauty there. There's a lot to unpack. So we all have so a big part of speaking is sharing stories, sharing our stories. I like the way you said you're an emotionally naked speaker. There's a difference between being emotionally available to your audience, being relatable. I'm a human, you're a human, and connecting with them, and being somebody who's just uh, obviously, even if they're trying to put a brave face on, obviously deeply struggling, right? And you're not
Right,
getting that hope piece at the end because you're not seeing it in them. I think to look at you is to see a woman who is standing strong despite being knocked the blank down, right? Um,
right.
there's a lot of us that just couldn't even imagine bouncing back from something like that, and I'm sure it's a lifelong journey, but at least you can on that journey inspire other lives with with the life of your son, right? It's more about his
Right,
life than the end of it. So I love what you said. So you take that hardship because we all need our story banks. We relate to audiences. We become real to audiences through our stories. Nobody wants a pot of information dumped on their head, right? They want to
right.
be there with you and journey through, and that's how you do it. It's through your life experiences, through your professional experiences, through and through some of your hardships. So I love those 4 H's. So you take the
Hardship,
yep,
help, healing, hope.
hope.
And
Beautiful.
that hardship is the one that you don't want to be spending like 50% of your time. If you are not in the place where you can do that yet, it just means you're not quite ready yet.
Mhm. Choose
And
another story, right? Yep.
right,
Because your job, when you're on that stage, your job is not about the healing part. That comes off stage, right? Your job is to bring a difference in that room, and you can only do that if you're holding it together.
yeah. And I have to tell you that those index cards that people return to me, that has really helped me craft that, especially the keynote that really touches every audience member. And so it's kind of been a group effort. I'm like, well, nobody, I've been to 10 things, nobody's mentioned such and such. But oh my gosh, this one's big. I need to sort of expand and give more examples with that.
Well, you're speaking to their pain, and what a brilliant strategy. I have never heard somebody say that they do that, and I just think, number 1, yeah, golden data for you, but also it shows
Yes.
them that you actually do care, that you were worth their while, right? You delivered something that touched their lives, but just by the act of them writing it down, not only do they synthesize for themselves what they got out of it, but you further understand the pain that your average audience member is going through, and you can speak to their pain and then drive them to that hope piece. right, because they're all dealing
Right.
with different
You
things.
know, what's interesting is when I first mentioned
Mm.
the one thing they learned, they're sort of passive, and a few of them will grab the index cards. It's when I tell them why that I will need them later. I've just told you my personal story. I'm going to crash. These prevent that crash. These fill me back up.
Ooh,
All of
that's
a sudden, everyone is grabbing for the index card because they're invested in the process of wanting to sort of buoy someone else, to kind of help them fill back up, to help them move forward. So I'm telling them, yes, I can do this. And I can do it well, but thank you for your help. And you're part of this work. And they're part of the speech. And their comments become some of my slides. I mean,
that
I
is
hear it.
that's like another layer of brilliance there. That's really, incredible. It's not pretty please, will you please, sign my little card? That'd be really nice if you would sign my little card. You're
Right,
giving them marching orders. When you sign this card, you're not only helping to save me from the inevitable crash after this, because I've had to, I've shared my story again today. So there's going to be so this your card will help me, but it also helps me to craft my talk in a way that's going to help the next audience
right.
even keener. But you're giving them marching orders for each speaker. It's going to be a little bit different. It's not, oh, pretty please, leave me a star, leave me, give me a like, leave a little
Right.
fill out my feedback form, whatever it might be.
Yeah,
It's
I never have to wait for survey results that, always get those there, and I love what they say on them, and I'm very pleased to get them. But the reason I have so many testimonials is people write them on a card, or if it's a virtual event, they put it in the chat. And
mm,
then I get the chat file, and I don't use anybody's whole name. And if I'm going to use a whole name, then I have their, express written
permission.
permission to do
Mm.
so.
Ah,
Like if a dean of a university or a CEO of a company that, I'm going to ask specifically for, may I use your photo? May I use your name? And I'm going to ask permission. But these others, I can just say attendee at such and such conference.
truly powerful and obviously effective way of getting that feedback. We're always like wondering, how can we really get the feedback? And it's more on a broader scale. So I love the way that you did that. It's not just one or two people letting you know. It's probably a good portion of the room if you approach it the way that you just approached
Oh,
it. So
and I have in the little baskets behind me, they're filled with thousands of these cards because guess what, Antoniette, I keep them all.
I see the baskets. And you know what?
Yeah,
How beautiful that you talk about hardship, help, healing, hope. There's days you're going to need that healing and hope again. And
and
you've
I
got your
can
baskets.
that's right. I dig right in there and I start looking at them and, I'll pick up a random pile and it's kind of like my book of wins because
Your
we
book of
all,
wins.
as speakers, especially, need that book of wins when we hit that imposter syndrome feeling, which we all inevitably hit at some point.
Well, speak about hit. You just hit on something really neat that I might borrow, but I will give you the credit for. I have each of my speakers create a, a, a story bank. And this actually came from a previous guest, Cesar. Look up that show. That was a really great one. But he
Okay.
has a story bank where you're going along life and you come across a little thing that happens and you don't want to forget it. So you just pull out your phone, you have Trello or a running document, whatever, and just put a few kind of triggering keywords in there so you can remember the story that you can draw from for that might fit a different audience. And so you've got this bank of stories that fit your signature message, that you can even make even more relatable for specific audiences. I'm going to add to that uh, bank of wins.
Yeah,
right? That you just
book of
you
wins.
say book of wins, but yeah,
Yeah.
and
Bank of wins is
thank you
good. I like that. Bank.
that as you go along, those those little case studies, right? There was a, and you wouldn't use a name or you just use a first name. There was an audience member who saw me speak last summer, and she said she was contemplating suicide. And by the time she left, she said she saw the purpose in her pain. She discovered that there was purpose in the unthinkable. And now she is doing ABC, right? So
Right.
that's a win that can inspire other people. It's not just only your story now, it's all those baskets of stories that you have
Yeah.
behind you. Ah, love it, love it, love it, love it. That's
Yeah,
so
and I have well over 3,000 blog posts because one of my strategies for working through the agony of having lost a son to suicide was writing about it. Now, I don't think writing in public is for everyone, but I was by trade a writer. I started off writing in advertising agencies, coming up with ideas for TV, radio, newspaper, that kind of thing. So that was kind of a natural go-to for me. And that gave me my story bank. So when I wrote my book, Diary of a Broken Mind, I just went back and pulled, you know, all of those stories. And then I could put my son's lyrics in there. And it reminded me of how I felt at a certain time. So it was kind of a running journal, so to speak, of the process.
a running journal of the process. That's another really important thing for us to realize. We get to further on down the road and we forget where we were, but yet we're
Right.
still speaking as speakers. We're still speaking to that person we were, that stage we were once in. And you know, there's times you get in front of more seasoned speakers and they're talking at a level you aren't at yet. So you're missing the links of, okay, well, how did you go from there to here? You're missing those links. I think
Right.
that strategy, your book of wins, is another way to not forget where you were and the journey, the steps that it took you to get to where you are and eventually where you're going to be. Yep.
Right. And as a speaker, I had to break down those steps. Somebody said, "You are the perfect example of post-traumatic growth." Well, I had never heard that phrase. And this was years ago. And I'm like, well, what does she mean by that? And then somebody said, "I want you to do a keynote on post-traumatic growth." And I'm like, okay, you've challenged me. I'll look it up, see
No
what that is.
coincidences, right? Wow.
And then that helped me break down my own process of healing. What were my coping strategies? And since I've done grief workshops with people, or, when I go into a company or a business and I'm, helping them come up with their own toolbox of strategies, I am not telling them what to do. I'm giving them examples I use, but also examples other people have used. I mean, beekeeping, rock climbing, reading fart jokes. I mean, they're just like so many really good ones. Somebody said angry hikes. Um, there have been unusual ones, and I'll ask them to get into groups and come up with, their list of coping strategies. And so I went into university one time and I said, "So, what is a really great coping strategy?" Well, there's this row of young men on the back, and they're college students and they're male. So, what do they think? They're like, sex, sex. And I'm like, okay, what else? And they're like, oh my gosh, there
Is
is
there something else?
nothing else. And I said, well, there is a reason you have to have a toolbox. And they were like, they were still stunned, like there can't be anything else in the whole world. And I think they were still surprised that I also said, yes, that's a coping strategy. It's legit. So they were a little taken aback that I agreed with them. And then I said, here's a scenario. You're in the frozen food section at Kroger. You see an old girlfriend with a new guy and you're about to have a panic attack. Is that strategy available to you right then in the frozen food section of the Kroger store
Mm.
without getting arrested? That's why you
Text
need
is
a
not gonna do
toolbox.
it, right?
Right. Sometimes you
Pop
gotta,
into the refrigerator.
do the deep breath and learn some breathing strategies to, later I'm going to get on my Peloton bike or I'm going to go running, but you have to have some that can be used right then, because there are different strategies for different times and events. Like I'm in a car or I'm with some people. So,
Or on a
that's
stage.
why,
Yeah,
yeah, that's why you have a toolbox. So,
I love it. So do you have a bank of tools? Like, do you ha how do you like, where do you gather that, or you just something you learn along the way?
oh man, I've got a huge toolbox and I'm always adding to it. So the latest tool is Tibetan singing bells.
Hmm,
I like to go to sound bath. And another one is a morning Pilates. It doesn't have to be long. I found it on YouTube, but it's time for me.
mhm.
So some days I have 10 minutes and some days I have 30 minutes. Usually I'll take a walk later in the day that's 3 or 4 miles, but that kind of energizes me to for my day. Writing,
Mm.
I love hiking. Um,
So essentially something that feeds you, something that feeds your soul. Mine is forest bathing. If I don't get my hikes in, I'm not a good wife, I'm not a good friend. Like, it's just what I need. But when
being outdoors.
yeah, I need it. And when we give ourselves reasons why we can't, right? Too busy, too many things, then we don't show up as powerfully.
Right.
So I love it. And it's all about all of these strategies that you're sharing, Ann Moss, is what it really boils down to is that relatability. You're human, I'm human, and connection. And
Yeah.
really to a fourth grader, a fifth grader is king, right? You don't need to be way out here. You just need
Right.
to be a few steps ahead. That gives them hope. And so you do it in such brilliant ways. Another thing that you had mentioned earlier that is just one more way to connect with people is be aware of the seasons and the themes. I think you said, was it May is mental health month, September is suicide prevention. Well, that speaks obviously directly to your expertise, what you bring to the table. But every single month has some sort of theme. Coffee month,
Right.
whatever, whatever it might be. Yeah.
Domestic violence month. I mean, because that figures into mental health. Recovery month for people from addiction or gambling. I mean, my son had substance use disorder
Mm,
from heroin.
mm,
So, how does it figure in to that particular, and your audience? Who
yeah.
is your audience? You know, uh, if they're men, you want to at the end to leave men with some resources like mentherapy.org. If it's mostly women, you want to leave them with resources that are available to them. Maybe it's a group of moms, and I want to make sure that they get a list of 10 things to build resilience in their kids.
Hmm.
How do you help them build mental health resilience? And
Yes.
you know, what are the leave behinds? What are the things? What are the burning questions that they have? And I want to give them those resources. They've come, they've sat in that chair, they've listened to me, they've engaged. And I'm a big one for looking in the faces of all my audience members because that
Mhm.
gives me energy. It feeds me.
Yes.
And then I want them to have something to take away so they can move forward with it. That I don't want to just tell a nice story or a story that leaves them feeling like they're in a dumpster.
Yeah.
I want them to feel inspired to do something, and then I need to give them some tool that's easy to digest to be able to do that and move forward.
And that's really where transformation comes from, right? And I love the way you
Right.
said that. What are the leave behinds that you can deliver that answers the burning questions that they walked into the room with? What do they get to walk out of the room with that then becomes real transformation and happy side effect? They're going to want more, right? So they're going to go find your book. They're going to go find where you're talking next. They're going to go find other ways to connect with you. So it's all about them. It's a little about you too. And that kind
Yeah.
of win, 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 all the wins. Well, about this time of our journey together here today on Speak Pact, I know that a good number of our audience are going to want to know, how do I find Ann Moss Rogers? Where do you like to be reached out to? Or what are some ways people can find you?
LinkedIn is my primary focus. I have a presence on Instagram and Facebook, but where I post most often and invest most of my time is on LinkedIn. I have a newsletter, goes out once a week. It is personally written by me, not by somebody I've hired. And I've
Or a
written
robot?
that newsletter for over 9 years. And it used to go out every single day for the first 5 years.
Wow.
I know. And now it's once a week. It comes out on Tuesday mornings. And then I have one for business people and one for educators.
So somebody who might want to start receiving those, do they just reach out to you in LinkedIn
They
and
can
get that?
do that,
Mhm.
and then they can go to my website, Mental Health Awareness Education, and then there's a button that says subscribe to the newsletter,
Okay, so
and it's
mentalhealthawarenessaeducation.com.
long.
That's okay, it's easy to remember. Mentalhealthawarenessaeducation.com or Ann Moss Rogers on LinkedIn. And Ann Moss is spelled ANNEMOSS all together. Ann Moss,
And Moss Rogers, right,
ANNEMOSS, and then Rogers like Kenny.
right. I'm not if you Google me, I'm not that hard to find.
Yeah, very unique name. I've not ever seen it combined like that. It's really pretty.
And I
Um,
would love for people to connect on LinkedIn because we have kind of a group of people who promote mental health awareness topics, and we all support one another.
mhm.
And, and it's worked because I'll tell you, the first 2 years I started posting on mental health on LinkedIn it was crickets. No likes, no comments. And then now some of them get close to, I've had close to 1 million on a few of them. And, that's not average, that's not usual, but at least 1,000 to 10,000 is pretty typical.
That says a lot right there, and Moss. It's math, not magic, and the one who doesn't quit wins, right? It's just like, ah, this isn't. I mean, after 2 months, most people are just like, nobody's interested in this. They're not listening. I'm wasting my time. I'm just putting my heart out there. Nobody's receiving whatever it is. Not doing any good. Let me go plant a garden. Let me go do something else.
Well,
Not
you
that
know what
planting a garden is go
the
ahead.
one of the main things, the reason I kept going was I kept getting DMs.
Mhm,
Oh, that's so thank you. I lost my mother to suicide and blah, blah,
mhm.
blah. And they tell their story. And I'm like, click like, please comment. So I'm like, why am I not asking these folks who are DMing? And they started doing that. And then we kind of found each other on LinkedIn, other like grieving parents, other people who had gone into recovery, some substance use disorder, other people in mental health. And then we started connecting and helping one another and being generous with one another and their stories and not just all that self-focus, which our our current culture is kind of very self-focused.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that you did that organically, but as kind of a happy side effect to that is you're really understanding you went through your own journey and
Mhm.
your process to pull yourself through. And that's not going to be the same for everybody else who's dealing with a similar tragedy. And so you get to learn about them and how and what their journey was and what their pain points were because now you're speaking to whole audiences of this, right? And you're really understanding the different ways that people dealt with the blow and how they pulled themselves out of it. So yeah, all goodness. I'm going to shift gears a little bit because this you really bring to the table that's super unique and very can be very specific to speakers. So we're totally shifting gears, and that is your SEO for speakers. So what is that, and how why is it significant, and what are some strategies there? Mhm.
So I used to be, I told you I was in advertising, and then I morphed into digital marketing. And everybody's like, no, that's fake. It'll never last. And of course, it became the thing,
Rest is history. Yeah.
right? And my specialty was content marketing. And what I got really good at was ranking really well on Google because I'm really good at content as a writer. What do people want to read? Am I presenting it in a way that's digestible and relatable? And because I do that really well, I I learned, well, 2008, everything crashed. Nobody was interested in anything, and SEO became my thing. Mostly, I wasn't like creating backlinks, but I was doing things like helping people with content. What are your keywords? What are your long tail keywords? And that's the key, is the long tail keywords,
Mm.
sort of going in through the back door. And a lot of people, like if you try to rank for leadership speaker, good luck. That's going to take a lot of time and money. But leadership speaker for the utilities industry or for something very specific within that industry, and lo and behold, you can kind of wrap around and eventually you'll get ranked for some of those main ones that you want to. You find yourself on the front page. And so really I've gotten into that. I don't take a lot of those clients. I'll take one or two, and every once in a while I'll have like a group event and take them through the process. But it's a lot of work. But if you kind of start with that one page of here are my keywords, here are the long tail keywords, and then you kind of start to focus on that and focus your blog posts on that and focus your content on that without stuffing the page. You don't want to do keyword stuffing. So you've got to have a strategy. You'll start to try to push people towards their strategy and they don't know. But sometimes by asking them about their keywords, they'll kind of come around to their strategy just because this is the keyword I want. Oh, so that's the audience you want to speak to. So it's funny. I've actually helped people kind of land on their unique selling proposition just through this exercise.
Okay, so we've all heard SEO, right? And it's this enigma. You either have to spend tens of thousands of dollars to get somebody to do it for you. It may or may or not work, or you can try these little tips and tricks. I love your the long tail keywords. Uh, that's going to be way more powerful than kind of more generic. Like there's things like that you can do, but where is it honestly important, and where's the shift? Like, is SEO still going to be a thing with this in this world of AI and the massive technology shifts that we are living in right now?
Yeah.
And is it so when you talk about SEO, is it like these long tail keywords for a blog post, whereas maybe it's a hashtag for a post? Like, just kind of give us the picture there. How do you? Mhm.
So you need to adapt. It's constantly changing because I kind of was doing it for other people and realized I'm not doing enough of this for myself. And I started investing in it for myself. And guess what? I was getting all these Google forms. Oh, yeah, I found you on Google. And I have a little question. How did you find me? Referral, Google, LinkedIn, or other social media. And most people will check that box. They don't tell me exactly how they found me, but it takes a lot of time and a lot of patience. So, it's things like if you've got a GoDaddy site and it takes your page 10 minutes to load, you ain't showing up on the first page. That's just kill it. That's just shooting yourself in the foot. So that's an obvious, easy change for you to make. I did not spend $10,000, but I had patience. I do a lot of these events, and right afterwards, I will reach out to you and ask you if you would sort of underline particular words that link back, excuse me, to my site.
Mm.
And that creates a backlink from a reputable place and creates a backlink to my site.
Mm.
And it's a credible takeaway. And that is very helpful as well. So a strategic plan that I would create for somebody is one that you could execute based on your knowledge level.
Okay, so let me make sure I understood that part right. So you do a podcast interview,
Mhm.
um, or maybe you give a talk somewhere, and they're going to present it, or maybe you're featured in a magazine, an online magazine. You'll actually write the producer and say, "Hey, when you post this content that we created together, um, if you'll if you underline and link certain words throughout back to my website." I don't know if you say I'll do the same or so, but am I understanding that right? And how many people actually do it?
Most of them do it
Mhm.
because one thing, especially if it's like a high authority site
Mhm.
and they've asked you to write something and they're not paying you, well, you need something for having, invested all that time to do that expert article, right?
Yep.
I always do reciprocal linking because reciprocal linking, no matter if it's AI or whatever, is always going to work. People always want to know the answers to questions.
Yeah.
They're going to search in some way or another. And it's just important to remember that. Like, so right now I notice I'm in the AI results, but my picture is not showing up. So I
Oh,
looked it up and I did this stuff in my code. It's still not showing up. So I will reach out to somebody who can do that one thing for me. So yes, it will cost me money, but it's not going to cost me $10,000. I'm like, the one thing I want to do is I'm already showing up mental health speaker for workplace in the AI results. Everybody has their picture show up, but I don't. Can you make my picture show up? And it has to do with coding and Google, and it's way too techy for me. So
yeah.
I will hire somebody to do that part.
These are really brilliant hard-earned strategies, and thank you for sharing them with us. I
Oh,
think
you're
they're
welcome.
important. I know this isn't your main thing, so if somebody wanted a tool or other resources to learn as a speaker how to get found, because that's what it's all about at the end of the day, right? How to get found by the
Right.
right people who are looking for you. Where would you go? Like, where would you send us if we wanted a
Well, you
resource?
go to mental health awareness education and do the quick, it says contact, and one of the things you can do is quick question. And you can say, I heard about it, I'm interested, and then you get like a consultation call that you pay for. That's,
Mhm.
not a lot. And then you make the decision, do I want to invest $500, $1,000, just to get sort of that outlay of what do I do? Because there's so many options. Content is king. Good content will never go out of style. I have one right now about banning cell phones in schools that's going gangbusters because I spent a lot of time and I have a lot of sources that I use that I link back to in that article to make it. And then I got quotes from people who actually did it, and then quotes from kids who went through that process and were like, oh my gosh, I loved it. My parents were the ones that didn't want to do this. So
Okay, well,
that
wait a minute, wait a
article's
minute. You Okay, so you're a mental health awareness expert. You're a mental
mhm,
health expert, period. But you also you will consult a speaker on
mhm,
I didn't realize that. That's
yeah.
fabulous. Yeah, reach out. Reach out to Ann Moss. She's figured it out. This is good. Yeah, I didn't realize that, Ann Moss. That's beautiful. I just might reach out to you. That's really great. Okay, so you go to mentalhealthawarenesseducation.com and then click on contact and just have a uh,
Yeah, and there's one that says quick question, and then I'll send you a link to my consultation page. You can book a time and we can just have that, for $100, you kind of get the overview. And
sure.
it may be that that's all the information you want.
Hmm.
Or it may be that, like, okay, I might want to do a little bit of a package. And then if I'm doing kind of sometimes I take 5 to 10 people through a process, a series of workshops.
Great.
But I've not done it as much because it could easily become my main thing.
I was going
And
to
now
say
it might someday, but I'm still kind of holding on to,
your passion. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, there are a lot of people who need mental health strategies and a lot of people who go to numbing them.
Yeah.
And, people need to learn how to feel their feelings and understand that that won't kill you because I'm
Yeah.
alive to tell you that it won't.
Well, and talk about something that's not going anywhere, right? You said content is king. Mental well-being is not going to go anywhere. A
Mm.
new season in this world, new set of mental challenges for all of us,
Yeah.
and some, more immediate and serious than others. So I love what you're doing. I love what you're
Oh,
about.
thank you.
As we close, and Moss, I know that you know my signature
Mm.
ending question. What is one challenge that you would give to the Speak Packed audience who has a message and has found that hope at the end of tragedy and want to get their story out there in a way that helps other people? What in what ways could what are some tactical things that they could do to really be found?
I make sure at every place I go speak. So I have like a 1 page thing, and I have several that they can take with them, and one that's laminated and has QR codes for ebooks, signs of depression, uh, how to deal with burnout, how to tell your mental health story. Um, finding your purpose, all these kinds of downloads, and they're I have I have so many now, it's back and forth. And I usually have one that I've focused in the presentation. So in that presentation, they can do the QR code and they can get every resource that I mentioned in the presentation. Like I mentioned a video, I mentioned a game. Everybody always wants the one called the coping card. They want to do that with their group. Well, all you have to do is do the QR code, and then you're building your list, but you're also giving something of value. And then they sign up for the list, they get an autoresponder with that particular resource. And when I go to certain audiences, like if it's a clinical audience, for example, they'll get more, clinical tools like the Ask Suicide Screening tool and, other specific tools or scripts. Parents often like scripts. How do I talk about to my teen about these delicate subjects? And I'll have like a sample script of how they can have that conversation. And it might not be the exact conversation they're thinking about having, but they get it once they kind of read it going, oh, I see the nuances here. I am not lecturing. I am listening more and lecturing less.
Mm.
And I am asking them questions, and they are coming up. I'm planting the idea in their head, and they're coming up with the solutions.
Ooh, so powerful. Okay, listen less. No, Listen more, lecture less.
Lecture
Listen
less.
more,
So
lecture less.
basically, making sure that you decide for each speaking engagement what kind of resources would this audience want to answer that burning question so they can carry on what you've said and make it work in their life.
Another thing that you're doing, that I feel like is, serving your audience at a higher level is, they've sat in front of you for maybe 45 minutes, maybe 90 minutes, somewhere in that neighborhood. You can only bring them so far without overwhelming them, right? So you
Right,
bring them so far during that talk, but then you don't just leave them there. So, good luck, take it.
right,
Hopefully, but you give them somewhere to go. And that call to action piece, right? You do that brilliantly. Take your pick. What do you need? Here's some resources I've developed over these decades I've been in this industry, and going through the solution side of what I do, what I'm all about, mental well-being. Um, they get the gift, but then they also get your newsletter if they so choose. They also have a more direct link to you should they want to just get on a phone with somebody and try to work through some things. Whatever it is that you offer outside of that conference room that they just saw you. I see a lot of speakers, they leave a lot of impact and a lot of money on the table because they're like, "Good, I hope you got some good things. Ciao." See you. See,
right.
maybe I'll
Yeah.
see you sometime. But you actually gave them that next step, very tangible next step. So beautiful way to
Thank you.
leave our Speak Packed audience with a real tactical challenge that they can do. They can go out and do.
Thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate your time. It is definitely an unrenewable resource, and you gave years of your wisdom to us in this 45 minutes or so that we've been together. Thank you for your generosity.
Thank you so much.
And for our beautiful Speak Packed audience that has stuck with us all this time, I know you've gotten value out of your time with us today. And why don't you post it forward? If you got value, that means somebody else in your circle is also going to get value. So post it forward, share this gift with them, and give us some flowers, some love, some likes, some comments. Let us know. Let's utilize Ann Moss's strategy, right? Let us know your one key takeaway that you got. Put it in the comments
Yeah,
and let
that'd
us
be
hear.
nice.
Let us hear about how we can serve you at a higher level next time, and what you got from this one. So thank you for being here.
Thank
And
you for
Moss,
having me.
we'll be talking again. I just know it.
Okay, good, good.
Ciao, ciao for now.